Hello and welcome to the magical world known as Baka to Basics. This video will be the first in our new series that looks at the origins of the different genres that populate the medium of anime and manga. With so many genres to cover, the obvious choice to get out of the way first is the most popular, the newest, the biggest craze in anime and manga, Isekai. So without further ado, I'm Summers from Baka to Basics, and this is a genre breakdown of Isekai. Class is officially in session. Have you ever thought to yourself, yeah, regular life is fine and all, but what if I could live in a fantasy world with dragons, magical powers, and enough waifus and husbandos to satisfy my every need? Now, what if I said that reality could be all yours if you just get hit by a bus, or scared into a heart attack by what you thought was a car, in the process pissed your pants? Well, this is the world of Isekai. And before you say anything, yes, we do know that Isekai is technically a subgenre of anime. But with how many of them keep popping up, it's only a matter of time till everything's just an Isekai. Hell, there is currently a manga running about a top Japanese baseball prospect being teleported to another world because the god of that world replaced war and fighting with games of baseball to decide the fate of entire countries. As for where Isekai came from as a concept, Isekai has origins in ancient Japanese literature, particularly the story of the fisherman Urashima Taro, who saves a turtle and is brought to a wondrous undersea kingdom. After spending what he believed to be 4 or 5 days there, Urashima returns to his home village only to find himself 300 years in the future. The folktale was adapted into one of the earliest anime films, Seitaro Kitayama's Urashima Taro, in 1918. Other precursors to the isekai genre include portal fantasy stories from English literature, notably the novels Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Peter Pan, and the Chronicles of Narnia. Yes, by this concept, Alice was technically the first isekai traveler not from Japan. The earliest modern Japanese isekai stories include Haruka Takachiho's novel Warrior from Another World and Yoshiyuki Tomino's anime Aura Battler Dunbine. Other early anime and manga titles that could be classified as isekai include Mashin Hiro Wataru, El Hazard, and The Vision of Escaflowne. In these stories, the protagonist stayed similar to their original appearance upon entering a different world, rather than what we see in a lot of today's shows where people are reincarnated into a completely different body. One of the most popular isekai of its time was the manga and anime series Inuyasha, which told the story of a young teenager who was transported through a well to a magical version of early Japan. This was a groundbreaking show for the genre, being one of the first, and sadly few, to incorporate a female lead in its story. What might be the most famous piece of animation ever is, in fact, an isekai. The film Spirited Away was the first isekai film known worldwide. Although the term isekai was not too commonly used at the time, now looking back, it definitely fits that genre. Looking at the late 90s and early 2000s, we have Digimon Adventures, which, yes, Digimon is an isekai, as well as the Dot Hack franchise. These were some of the first works to present the concept of isekai as a virtual world, with Sword Art Online, which debuted in 2002 as a web novel, following in their footsteps. Now, if you think I'm going to spend quality video time talking about Sword Art Online, then yeah, you're mistaken. Instead, I want to talk about what is widely seen as one of the most influential isekai of all time, The Familiar of Zero, which debuted in 2004. The Familiar of Zero told the story of a male lead, Saito, who is from modern Japan, being summoned to a fantasy world by the female lead, Luis. The Familiar of Zero popularized the isekai genre in web novel and light novel media, along with the website Shosetsuka ni Naro, Let's Become Novelists, known as Naro for short. The Familiar of Zero fanfiction became popular during the late 2000s, eventually spawning a genre of isekai novels on the site, which became known as Naro novels. The Familiar of Zero fanfiction writers eventually began writing their own original isekai novels, such as Tape Nagatsuki, who went on to create the show that gives even the most disturbed of masochists pause, ReZero. It is personally one of my favorites, but that says a lot more about me. However, whilst the familiar Zero did start the trend for Isekai, I must acknowledge the 2012 anime adaptation of Sword Art Online may have helped popularize the Isekai genre in anime, which led to more Isekai web novels being published on Naro and a number of Naro novels being adapted into anime. It was around this time that this term Isekai was truly coined. Later titles, such as Knights and Magic and the Saga of Tanya the Evil, started what is a trope most usually thought of when it comes to Isekai, and where the protagonist dies and is subsequently reincarnated into a different world. The most influential Isekai novel in this regard was Mushoku Tensai, which began as a Naro novel and popularized the reincarnation subgenre of Isekai, while establishing a number of common Isekai tropes. Mushoku Tensai was the most popular Naro novel for a number of years, and thus served as a point of reference for numerous Isekai writers that followed. Speaking of Mushoku Tensai, the anime has been phenomenal. And yes, there are subject matter that can be a little awkward and feel out of place. But looking at the show as just the show, there's this scene where our main character is eating a piece of bread. This single scene with bread has more care and characterization put into it than the entirety of X-Arm as a whole. And no, Johnny, I do not feel bad about saying that. But do check out his take on the beauty hidden in X-Arm. He does make some pretty great points. Not that I agree with him. Okay, kind of. It was actually pretty good. The Isekai genre became so popular during the early and mid 2010s that it started to generate backlash, both in Japan and over here in the West, from those who felt that it was overcrowding this greater anime and manga market, hence the Kirito clones, as we're going to call them, that seemingly pop out once or twice every single season of anime. That's about 8 Kiritos a year. That's 8 too many. In 2016, a Japanese short story contest organized by Bungaku Free Market and Naro placed a blanket ban on any entries involving Isekai. The publisher Kadokawa banned Isekai stories as well in their own novel contest in 2017. In May 2021, however, Kadokawa announced they would open an Isekai museum in July of the same year. Which, if that isn't the most Surrender Cobra-esque moment I have ever heard of, then I don't know what is. Look, we have to face it. Isekai is here to stay, and we do all know that. But instead of mindlessly watching shows that seemingly copy and paste from each other, I implore people to give Isekai as a whole a chance. This genre is teeming with great diverse stories, and for every Kirito clone, there's a Kagome, or a Rudius Grey Rat, to give you a very different outlook on these worlds. In closing, we just have to remind you that Isekai isn't bad. Just Sword Art Online. So yeah, watch Johnny make a video on that. Thank you everyone again for coming to today's session. If you enjoyed this video, leave us a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Also, comment down below about your history with Isekai and maybe give a suggestion for others to look into. I've been Summers with Baka to Basics, and I'll see you the next time that class is in session.